Hello, everybody. I don't know if you can you hear me and see me? If you could just give me a thumbs up if you can. Great, thank you very much. Listen, thank you everyone for attending. It's lovely to see you all again. And just to welcome you to the 4th session of Pathways, which is a series that has been commissioned by the Arts Council, but moderated and developed by David Teven, who I will introduce you or reintroduce you to. If you've attended these sessions before, you'll be aware that they've taken place over the last 6 weeks, and they've been very rich and discursive, and we have learned a lot from festivals. And just on behalf of the Arts Council as head of festivals here, just to say thank you for your contribution, and also to let you know that we are listening. So a lot of what has been debated and discussed is fed back to council, and it does help us in making decisions around potential supports and funding initiatives that we can help to support the festival sector. So just to thank you for that. Just a couple of pieces of information, and my apologies if this is repetition for people that have attended before, which is we are hoping within the next 4 to 6 weeks to publish some guidance in partnership with Fulcher Island, which is for the safe presentation of festivals and events. And this is specifically a guide which supports festivals to interpret the public health guidelines in relation to COVID, so that if you are thinking of doing live events or presenting work for the public, this hopefully will be a useful tool for you. When it's published, we will let you know. And we'd really like your input again, asking you as a sector to come back to us on your feelings and your thoughts on the development of a resource organisation for festivals, and we will facilitate some sessions for you to talk to us about that as well. So just remains for me to thank David for all his hard work. This is the last session, and to thank all the previous speakers as well, and also to thank our current panelists who I'm really interested in hearing from today. I know it's going to be a really interesting session. So to thank Fergus and Mervi, Wolodymyr, Teresa, Charmaine, Tara and Lorraine today. You're very welcome, and we really look forward to hearing from you. So I'm just going to hand over to David. Thank you once again, and look forward to hearing all your discussions at the end. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Carl. And you're all very, very welcome again. It's so sad that we're not in a big room, because I've seen the names on the list, but during the sessions, I'm concentrating madly on the technology and haven't been able to enjoy seeing you in the room with us. So thank you all for those who've stuck with us over the 4 weeks and those who've dipped into it. And again, like Carl, thank you to today's speakers, who I'll introduce very shortly. We have a very busy session, so I'm going to give only a very briefest introduction today to remind people of the housekeeping. We do have a 90-minute session. We need to finish at 4 o'clock today. The presentations by 4 o'clock today. So I'm going to be working to achieve that. We'll then have a 5-minute break, and then we'll go into breakout groups. So during the session, in terms of dialogue, please use the chat to introduce to say hello to each other, and to input any information you feel you can add to the conversation that's going on in the sessions. Today's session is titled Festivals as Collaborators, Enablers of Creative Practices and Placemaking, which is very central to certainly what Carl and I and the festival team understand of the central core feature of festival making. And I hope that the speakers over the course of I mean, the range of festivals we have here is quite diverse, both in scale and in art form focus. So these 4 sessions have aimed at core practices that we all share. Planning, the mission, and the public engagement were the 3 previous sessions. And this one is focusing on that aspect of festival making, the negotiation with stakeholders, which is so central to our practice and it makes festivals possible. So I've invited our first speaker to introduce our first speaker, the Cork Midsummer Festival, which runs over 10 days coinciding with the summer solstice, is one of the biggest multidisciplinary festivals funded by the Arts Council. The festival describes itself as using the city as its stage and inspiration. I can verify that this aspiration is delivered, having had occasion to traverse the city many times over, attending the festival in recent years. Events I've had the good fortune to see included a visual arts event in people's homes in Shandon, a contemporary music event on the Mardyke Bridge, and the bridge serving both as the instrument and the venue, and a dance show in a bingo hall in an industrial estate on the edge of the city. To achieve this level of integration demands that the organization develop and sustain a complex matrix of stakeholder relationships. Here to tell us about the Cork Midsummer Festival's approach to strengthening festival practice through partnership is their director, Lorraine Maye. Lorraine, you're very welcome.
Hello, thanks, David. Adrian is going to be working my slides for me today. Thank you, Adrian. And thanks to the Arts Council for asking me to be a part of this today, and good afternoon, everyone. In my 8 minutes, I'll be giving you a whistle-stop tour of some of the partnerships at Cork Midsummer Festival. And I'll be focusing mostly on local partnerships within that. So partnerships that obviously they're national, international, but also local, and those are the ones that I'll be focusing on today. So the first is our partnership with other arts organisations in the city. Going back to 1997, when the festival began, it was a way of celebrating and bringing visibility to the arts and the work of arts organisations in the city. So the festival was born as a partnership project, though the nature of those partnerships has really changed over the years. So in 2014, the festival initiated an external review of the organisation because we were going through a period of rebuilding and redevelopment. And a big part of this involved consulting with stakeholders in the city, so audiences, artists, funders, cultural organisations, to get a benchmark of where they felt the festival was, and also where they felt the opportunities were for us in the cultural landscape, both locally and nationally. And through this process, we identified a few opportunities for where and why partnerships with other organisations could be strengthened, and also to approach those in a more strategic way. So over the coming years after that, we worked very closely with arts organisations to develop programme strategies, particularly for the festival. So these were places where the aims of the festival and the aims of those organisations overlapped. And more broadly speaking, organisations had all identified the festival as a space where audiences were more likely to take a risk on something new, where there was a lot of cross-promotional opportunities citywide between those organisations, where they could work with us to present work off-site or use existing spaces in new ways, a context for ambitious or large-scale work, and where we could share resources to platform, develop and support work by Cork artists. So this slide here shows the culmination of years of partnership work with Cork Opera House, just one of the partners in the city that we work with. And in 2019, we presented 5 projects with them as part of the festival, so quite a lot of projects. So here you see Junk Ensemble and their brilliant work at Different Wolf, an ambitious dance opera project, the Cork Proms, which was a big civic event to happen in the city and also showcased the work of Cork musicians, Theatre for One, a show that was for 1 audience member and 1 actor in a dedicated mobile theatre space, presenting excellent new work by some of our finest writers. And also it animated the space in front of Cork Opera House, Emma Place, for a week over the festival as well. And So Percussion, an international percussion quartet, whom Cork Opera House had commissioned new work for, but needed the right context to present that within. So all of this made sense. And again, it sort of culminated over years of conversations and figuring out those overlaps between us. And then when we had to cancel the festival as we had planned it in 2020, these partnerships with the cultural organisations were really key in the development of a programme of work that we presented in June called Midsummer Moments. So we pulled this together over about 5 weeks. And the Glucksman were the first to come to us with this gorgeous project, New Light. So that's the next slide there, Adrian, please. where they commissioned 8 Cork artists to create a billboard exhibition for the city. And this was bringing art to people as we emerged from a period of isolation and seeing the city with new eyes. And then in the next slide, we see an example of one of our partnerships with businesses in the city. So the Cork business community, they're hugely supportive of the festival, and they're embedded in the festival in lots of different ways. And one of which is this project called Cork's Long Table. And pre-COVID, this project was developed by the restaurants as a way of highlighting the amazing Cork produce in the seas and fields around Cork, and also the spirit of collaboration and pride that is so strong in Cork City as well. And we work really close with them on this. There's a steering committee that meets frequently in the months leading up to the festival to develop this visible celebration of food in the city. And you can see an image of the event there in all of its magnificent glory pre-COVID, 400 diners outdoors on the South Mall. It wasn't possible to do this last year. So that second image is an event that we came up with for the times that we're in with them. So we really wanted to support the restaurants. The restaurants really wanted to support the festival. And we created this project called Cork's Long Table Picnic, which was for audiences to enjoy at home, which very much still celebrated the ethos behind the event. And then just moving on to our next partners, the local authorities are key partners of the festival, as well as obviously being core funders of the festival and funding individual events through projects, placemaking, recreation, Creative Ireland, a huge list of departments and funds. They're also key partners in the delivery of those events to audiences in June. So just to go through a few of those, in terms of the Long Table, they secure road closures and assistance on other aspects of the Long Table, such as waste management, all of which are key to the delivery of the project. And it's not an easy ask to close the South Mall in Cork City. So because the council are so invested in both the festival and in the restaurants and the businesses in the city, they enable that to happen. In 2018, we brought the brilliant street theatre company Kamchatka to Cork. And this is a very disruptive project. In Cork, they were scaling banks, they were taking pints, they were jumping in cars as they stopped at traffic lights, they were commandeering shops. And we couldn't have done this project without the assistance of Cork City Council and their city centre coordinator, who saw the benefits that this kind of artistic intervention would have for the city at a time when footfall was low in the city. In COVID, Cork City Council worked with Kirkadurka on their project Contact, which was part of Midsummer Moments, where a theatre show was brought directly to green spaces in housing estates. And the local area officers raised awareness in the community that this was happening in the individual housing estates and the surrounding housing estates. And they also made sure that all of the greens were mowed, so all of the green spaces were mowed, and that there was a flat playing space was available for this event as well. And finally, for today, I wanted to touch on one of our larger participatory projects. Participatory and socially engaged practice is really central to what we do at the festival. So this project, which is on the next slide, is called La Cocina Publica, the public kitchen, and it's by Teatro Container. And it's housed in a shipping container. It's a mobile kitchen that brings people together through theatre, food, and dining. So it's a project built completely from the ground up. It starts as an empty container, and everything that ends up in the kitchen is from the local community. Recipes, crockery, glasses, everything. After months of work with local residents, the project culminated in an outdoor dining experience where artists worked with local communities to cook local recipes together in the container, which was served to diners, with local residents performing at different times during the dinner. This project took 3 years to bring to fruition. So again, an example of how long some of these partnerships and projects can take to realize. And this was led by Kath Gorman, our head of participation and engagement. So in terms of how some of those partnerships worked, the first decision, and maybe we might move on to the next slide where you can see a list of those partners. The first decision was the neighbourhood location. So where should it go? What community would benefit and enjoy a project like this? And Kath approached a number of different agencies to sound out possible city locations. And in particular, Denise Cahill of Healthy Cities Cork recommended the South Parish area, and particularly the Douglas Street area, because it had strong local networks and community development agencies and a commitment to community initiatives, such as the South Parish Learning Neighbourhoods and Green Spaces Cork. So to get the project off the ground and to root it properly in the neighbourhood, a local partner steering group was set up of both local organisations and appropriate Cork bodies like Cork City Council and more. And all of these meetings were held in Naonagle Place, which is a beautiful centre right in the middle of this neighbourhood. From November 2018, a series of steering group meetings were held, and these were really crucial in terms of introducing us to other partners, bringing other people on board, such as St. John's Central College and UCC Mature Student Office. Cork Food Policy Council also tied in their Food as Commons summer school into La Cocina, and delegates attended the performances. And Naonagle Place and the Cork Flower Studio provided practical support once the project was ready to go. And people were bringing donations of crockery and fabric and glasses into the Cork Flower Studio. And as well as providing a space for them to gather all of this, they were also gathering participants, because people were coming in and bringing things and asking them what was happening and getting involved in other ways. So that's just a taste of how some of those partnerships enabled those projects to happen. And then in 2020, just as part of our COVID presentations again in Midsummer Moments, Kath worked again with Teatro Container, and we developed a project called Little Druids for Humanity, which was a long distance magical virtual project that involved children making magic spells and potions and creating video stories about their experiences in their neighborhoods, all in order to transform the world into a better place. No better time than COVID to be concentrating on something like that. So just to finish, in terms of the challenges and the opportunities for partnerships in COVID, one of the greatest challenges that everyone will recognize at the moment is maintaining and developing partnerships through communication. Communication is difficult at the moment. Zoom and calls are not the same as in-person interactions, and it's difficult to build and maintain the same level of trust and the same sense of trust. Also, information doesn't flow in the same way. It doesn't flow along the same lines, where in pre-COVID, you could rely on networks to disseminate the information. Nothing trickles down or is passed in the same way now. So we have to work twice as hard at collaboration and partnership. And then in terms of the opportunities, I think one of the opportunities at the moment lies in the amount of high quality video and films that we're creating, because these visual aids can be really key in engaging new and existing partners in the work of our organizations. And we definitely saw that with La Cocina, where it was actually a video of it happening at another international festival that happened a couple of years after we had first seen it, that was able to really gather momentum around those partners and that project. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Lorraine, for such a wonderful introduction to this very complex area of our work. And I think all of the festival makers here will recognize those three areas that you spoke about, that the relationship with artists and arts organizations on the one side, with public bodies like the local council on the other, and with the public through participatory or other ways. And certainly for me, that key element of time, festival making is not something you do in a short space of time. You do it over years and years. And I certainly feel that was central. So thank you, Elaine. We're going to move on to our I think if I could just ask that people turn off their mute, that's lovely. The exponential increase in, where are we? The exponential increase in the number of festivals around the world and their importance in contemporary society has led to a similar growth in academic research of festivals that has in recent years been drawn together under the umbrella of what's known as festival studies. This emerging discipline has brought together the work of research coming from a myriad of disciplinary positions, including geography, economics, social science, and arts management, and cultural policy. The networked feature of festival making has been a core idea of Donald Getz, one of the most respected and cited academics working in this field of study. He has asserted that, and I quote, "The legitimacy of a festival organization depends on its capacity to connect with stakeholders and identify those legitimate partners who will be willing to devote the needed resources, as you have seen perfectly exemplified by Lorraine in the case of Cork Midsummer Festival. So today I'm delighted to be able to welcome here today, all the way from Finland, my colleague, Dr. Mervi Luonila. She herself is a former festival maker, and she has done her research has built on the work of Donald Getz by examining festival management from the perspective of networks. And I invited Luonila here to kind of provide that conceptual framing of the ideas that we've already seen Lorraine speaking about. So you're very welcome, Luonila.
Thank you, David, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity to participate this interesting webinar. And I appreciate a lot this work which is done in Ireland regarding this important and very lovely issue for me, the arts and cultural festivals. So as David mentioned, my background to research festivals are a totally multidisciplinary approach. My background is in art management discourse, but nowadays I work in the University of Jyväskylä as well as work in the Center for Cultural Policy Research, Cupore. So I think that there is not only one approach to study festivals and explore them, though I have different kind of viewpoints to introduce my idea for you. How I see festivals, I see them as a way to produce arts for wide range of audiences. Nowadays, they form a substantial part of contemporary culture as being key actors and platforms in production, distribution, and consumption of arts and culture. They create opportunities to participate in arts and culture and allow people to assemble together within a social environment to celebrate their and others' achievements and provide attendees surprising and unexpected moments, as well as holistic experience produced at the designed festival scape. The two characteristics of term festival in my approach are that festivals are produced at particular place according to a recurring time frame. The recurring nature separates repeated festivals from the other events and concomitantly create the basement for the legitimacy of festivals. However, the core idea of festivals lies on their agility and flexibility. Festivals are project-based productions that by cost-effective way can deliver new and experimental contents out of the walls. However, as one festival direction from Pori mentions and illustrates, due to their day-fly nature, they are, as production structures, easy to swipe away as well. Art festivals are organizations which produce a setting that enables cultural and holistic arts experiences. The festival-specific product, which can be comprehended as artistic content, as well as essential services designed according to the festival mission at the festival scape. The artistic content produced in event series is positioned as the core of the product. Thus, festivals might be considered as product-driven productions whose contents are associated as a result of creative act, and the product is consumed in an act of interpretation with artists, attendees, and other stakeholders at a particular time and place, as long as the so-called performance takes place. The liminality of festivals' peak season and thus production timeframe as well influences the economy and resourcing when we compare festivals to the production structures of arts institutions, for instance. The needs for material and immaterial resources and the temporal nature of the festival influence the production environments of festivals, which are presented in the literature as networked entities consisting of various stakeholder groups and co-producers. The stakeholders of festivals, such as the audience, media industry, local trade and industry, sponsors, public authorities, and involved associations and clubs, create a platform for production where stakeholders take a multifaceted roles as regulators, facilitators, co-producers, suppliers, collaborators, and audience members, thus forming the salient basis for the festival production. This said, while the aim of the festival organization is to produce art, form the stakeholders the hybrid ecosystem that enables the production. Therefore, the production structure of festivals might be seen kind of ecosystem that combines a variety of goals and aims that are held by each stakeholders. For audience, festivals are a popular means through which citizens consume, participate, and experience art and culture, and are a vehicle to produce one's identity. For the artistic field, festivals might be seen as a key actor in development of different art forms and the introduction of new phenomena. For the host cities, festivals as a marketing tools and cultural boosters for cities and destinations might be valuable. For public authorities and decision makers, festivals might be seen as a kind of Swiss Army knives in the cultural policy, flexible and cost-effective ways of producing arts for citizens. Festivals also contribute through the festival production and consumption to their host destination. In this case, festivals may benefit from stakeholder support and positive decision-making among the public authorities, but also festivals contribute to such networks, strengthening public authority by creating cultural, social, and economic implications to the society, for example. In this sense, the fundamental activities of festivals are conducted in the networked environment that involves a complex ensemble of actors and interests to participate in festivals in general, as well as attached meanings to the festivals in particular. Therefore, we can say that basing on the interest towards festivals, the variety of dimensions meanings create a basis for the formation of network production structures. These structures are the result of meaning-based negotiations orchestrated by the festival manager or festival organization. The idea here in negotiations is in the festival's core task and mission in the arts. That will be the scaffold in the negotiations, as well as in the festival's legitimacy in the arts field, in the community, among the business stakeholders, among the public authorities, and so on. The stakeholders of festivals, such as audience, media industry. The conceptual idea of this short presentation have that festivals can be defined as a multifaceted platform for value co-creation that enables the exchange of the varied cultural, social, and economic meanings attached to them as a reflection of their legitimacy. In production networks, the purposes of festivals and stakeholders are twofold. Festivals are a way of creating added value for stakeholders, and stakeholders are enablers of festivals, producing festivals that respond to their own strategic goals. In this context, festivals contribute towards the value creation networks of stakeholders, where festivals are positioned as one of means of value creation. The basis for this lies in the network architecture designed and generated by festivals according to a mission. The aim of the festival-driven node is thus to seek opportunities for value co-creation. While this presentation has focused on networks and network management, the cultural, artistic, and symbolic dimensions of values represent a critical framework for understanding the management of arts festivals. The unique festival product is a strategic tool in meaning-based negotiations, and the management of arts festivals must pursue leadership that comprehends diverse topics, such a nature of art in addition to having sound managerial capabilities and understanding the logic of arts economy. To enable the festival-led orchestration of such processes, the clear mission and the ability management to create a culture of collective things and to enhance the festival legitimacy, thereby enables the formation of valuable network of nodes across a production platform that allows for successful resourcing. Therefore, from management point of view, I see that the key question in this case is, what are the dimensions of meaning that festival creates and it attached to it? I thank you for your interest, and I hope that some questions might come in mind from my viewpoints. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mervi. It's always inspiring, I think, to find to see that critical framing of the work we do as festival makers coming from that academic perspective. And I love the idea of the Swiss Army knife. It's certainly that need to have both this ability to look after finances and to look after logistics and day-to-day work, but also to have that sensitivity to the arts. And while doing all of this, to maintain this extraordinary plethora of relationships is really at the heart of all festival making. And I think many of the community do it with such ease and elegance without recognizing that what a particular talent it is. So it's lovely to have that outside perspective, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, David.
You're very welcome. So we're going to move on to back to some more specific examples now. And also looking at this management of complex matrix of stakeholder relationships, which is core to festival making. And in particular, the conditions created by the COVID pandemic, which has presented new challenges to this aspect of festival practice. But along with challenges, it has also presented, as we will see, opportunities. So our next three speakers will each provide an example of networking initiatives that they have been involved in creating during the past year, or been inspired to evolve of existing projects, as was the case with the Coquina Publica, which Lorraine spoke about, into a new form that it was sustainable during this difficult time. So the first of these is a new early music festival network that was set up with funding from the Arts Council Capacity Building Support Scheme. And here to tell us about it is Vlad Smishkewych from the Limerick Early Music Festival. You're very welcome, Vlad.
Thanks very much, David. And thank you very much to you, to Adrian and Carl and the Arts Council as well. And to all of you, thanks for joining me. I'll tell you about the Irish Early Music Network, IEMN, and this idea of a consortium. So the idea of a consortium to join forces, a kind of a network that would join forces of the festivals of early music in Ireland. It's not entirely new. Small festivals bringing together resources and ideas and communication in a working example of unity making for strength. So in the mid to late 1980s, the Early Music Organization of Ireland was formed. They presented several years of concerts in the Dublin area, and then soon others started with festivals of early music around Ireland. In the 90s, Lismore, Sligo and Galway festivals, then the Historical Harp Society of Ireland, East Cork and RD festivals in the early 2000s. This year, 2021, saw the first Limerick Early Music Festival. And the directors of these festivals all have known each other and know each other, occasionally communicate and interact. Recently, there have been some concerted mutual supports through letter writing for each other, resource sharing, but nothing quite formalized. So when the capacity building scheme was announced, several of the festival directors joined together and applied to benefit not only the applicants themselves, but all of the early music festivals in Ireland. So East Cork, Galway, and Limerick's directors joined together, were awarded the support, and right after, the remaining early music festivals all got on board. So from there, we go to the point that we have all of these early music festivals sharing similar and shared goals and challenges. and those are to promote historically informed performance, early music study and reception, to put on more performances, more courses and workshops, and increase early music education and outreach. And one of the ongoing challenges to develop and diversify audiences and build capacity for the future of the festivals and the early music artists in Ireland. So with this in mind, we had certain specific aims in creating the network: to develop outreach through innovative digital and in-person offerings, to create a promoters alliance of shared skills, knowledge, and resources, and to connect the Irish early music festivals to global and European networks. So from this have emerged our specific plans and goals in the short, medium, and long term, particularly from the 3 applicant festivals who received the support: producing online media resources, increase our audiences through broadcasting this media, thereby also increasing potential live audiences and international supporters now and going forward, and using separately and jointly held equipment, technology resources to create this media and to run these events. So all of the Irish Early Music Network members will benefit from these following things: the shared training sessions and coachings that include training in online content and course creation, publicity, marketing, audience building, audio and video production for in-house content creation, and online event management and ticketing training. Now, the purposes of these trainings is not going to be to supplant what our colleagues who do an excellent job when they're hired for these things for our festivals. Rather, it's to allow the festivals themselves self-sufficiency in their year-round content creation for audience building, and to promote even more efficiency when it comes time for the large-scale festival events. In other words, giving the marketing and publicity pros that we hire for the festivals themselves the ability to do what they do well and even better. So we're very excited about some of the things which we've planned as a consortium. So we've created an online remote teaching kit. It helps instructors that are away from our own locations or even outside of Ireland to deliver our online courses and workshops. Collaborating with REMA, the European Early Music Network, for Early Music Day events on March 21st. Under lockdown, this meant the ability to make things happen online for a global audience. And then the ongoing collaboration with REMA. And we're hopeful and very excited that we might soon be able to request membership in REMA itself as a national network, which would be excellent for many, many reasons. Individually, the membership cost of joining a network such as this can be debilitating to a small festival on a shoestring budget. It might not also have the people power or capacity to engage in a meaningful way with REMA and its resources. Our festivals are small, they're primarily volunteer run, but collectively, the festivals of the Irish Early Music Network would be better able to manage the costs and better be able to engage meaningfully with REMA, supporting the development of early music in Ireland. So that means that to close, I'd like to just share with you very quickly some of the examples of what the benefits to our network members include: producing and disseminating the Early Music Day events, technical and design consultancy, equipment use for production and post-production of the media. And we also assist each other actively in promotion and cross-promotion in social media, in delivering and preparing online courses and masterclasses. Some of them have already been happening. And also in joint calendar sharing, resource planning, and web presence, which hopefully with this will bring more traffic to all our festivals and to our network. And so with our ongoing projects, we have several of them coming from each of our member festivals: virtual exhibits of instruments, documentaries, and location videos. On their ongoing video series for outreach and education, and all the courses that we have planned through the various festivals coming online: recorder, voice, notation, harpsichord maintenance and tuning, you name it. So with that, I'll just leave you with our coordinates. Earlymusic.ie will be our upcoming joint website. We'll have the domain already. You can find out more about the REMA Early Music Network, European Early Music Network, at their website there. And there are the member websites of the Irish Early Music Network. So thank you all very much for listening. And David, thank you very much for letting me go over by a minute.
Thank you very much, Vlad. That was definitely a whistle-stop tour through this really interesting development, which was did not come about because of COVID, but you were able to progress it during COVID use the capacity building funding that the Arts Council and to strengthen the organizations during this period, but also I think into the future. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And it's an example of this networking, of networking between festivals, which is something that we've seen happening in Ireland in Birr area, where the festivals in Birr have got together and developed their own festival strategy for the town. And in West Cork, where there's recently been the development of an organization to bring together the 10 funded festivals in that region so that they can support each other. So I think these are wonderful examples of initiatives within the sector. So we're going to move on now to our next example. Our next speaker is Teresa Gouchelbauer, who's a former colleague of mine in Clonmel Junction Festival, where she worked as a participation director. Teresa now runs the Clonmel Applefest, a multidisciplinary festival that is focused on exploring place, heritage, and the natural environment through the medium of the arts. I've invited her here today to speak about a specific project which is called Indigenous, which also, I believe, was benefited from the capacity building funding from the Arts Council. And it is, Teresa described it as a creative capacity building project aimed at exploring the stories, traditions, and rituals of South Tipperary via collaborative learning and skill exchange process under the mentorship of the folklorist Billy McLean. So you're very welcome, Teresa.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. So the project I'm talking about, Indigenous, only started this February. So it's very much a work in progress. It came about in response to a capacity building call out last summer, for which I attended the seminar. Back then, Clonmel Applefest was getting ready for its 3rd edition, and our vision to celebrate the many cultural traditions and practices embedded in the Clonmel and South Tipperary terrain through the prism of the apple was in turmoil due to the COVID and uncertainty. Because of this, we very quickly decided that we wanted to apply for creative capacity building process, one of exploration, skill exchange, and peer learning, as we had already for a while felt that our festival needed to develop a different kind of creative approach, a multidisciplinary one anchored in the public realm with participative and collaborative practices and carnival arts at its core. So we followed a hunch that the interest that seemed to emerge in Celtic and folk practices in food and biodiversity related to a desire for connection to land and nature, and that this yearning could be harnessed into a collective endeavor towards some kind of a harvest celebration, being that our festival is at the end of September. That this idea coincided with a 6 months period of social distance and tactile deprivation only made that hunch more urgent, as events of collective joy, from St. Patrick's Day parades to musical festival to rock concerts, were being cancelled one after the other. This is when Billy McLean came to mind. I had heard about his work with his dingle on his dingle-based pagan rave project, and had met him briefly last year at the conference, the festival conference. Watching his work online and reading about his dedication to the concept of collective joy and community rituals really got my attention. So I hypothesized, what if we started our own troupe of festival revelers, and with his help, we would create a community harvest celebration, a kind of modern day version of a medieval carnival. So I contacted Billy, and we got on quite well very quickly, and it was very evident that he was interested in collaborative process of co-creation with what I envisaged to be quite an ad hoc assemblage of creative practitioners, musicians, and what I call community creatives. Once the funding was secured, we spread the word through personal contacts and social media and ended up with a really interesting mix of professional artists, amateur performers, and folklore enthusiasts, all of whom have a passion for Irish mythology, folk traditions, and community rituals. To date, with 4 online seminars under our belt, where each participant contributed ideas and concepts, the online shape of a place-based community procession and ritual, the outline shape, I should say, not the online, for the community-based procession and ritual is starting to emerge. From May onwards, as the process moves into a more tangible and tactile territory of making and practice, all outdoors, we anticipate a new momentum of skill sharing, peer learning, and cooperation. Gradually over the summer, as our plans consolidate, we will invite more people to join at outdoor public workshops, thus expanding the small core of 15 people to a wider public and adding new layers of contributors and participants, including members from dance schools, bands, choirs, of which there is huge amounts in Clonmel. While at this point, the outcome is still very open-ended, we envisage that if the event goes well, it would become an annual event with members of the original group joined by new ones to create a different version, thus consolidating the concept of the folk reveller troupe, which may in time perform at public events. Furthermore, because of the versatility of the practitioners involved, the process has and will enrich our own artistic outlook and feed into some of the strands of this year's festival and beyond, offering paid work to some of the participants while involving others in our program committee or in other roles. To conclude, we are truly delighted that we had this opportunity and that we have this opportunity to work with Billy McFlynn and to explore and experiment with such a vibrant group of local collaborators and to explore jointly our own personal and collective creativity. I would like to thank the Arts Council for their support under the capacity building scheme, which allowed for such an open-ended, creative, experimental, and enriching process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. I can see, I certainly got a lift out of the idea of revelry and collective joy. And I think it's something that we're probably all yearning for. And what's interesting about this project is that you used the time of COVID to create something new. And I think Lorraine has already mentioned how this time has been difficult in creating new, you know, how online has changed the way communication happens. So this is an example, I think, of a very good project in that it is building something new in this time, and hopefully something that will have strength in the public realm and live on into the future, when hopefully we will be reveling in the public realm again. So thank you very much, Teresa. So we're going to move on now to our final case study from Ireland. This time it's from Sligo. We've already seen examples of the multidisciplinary festival in Cork, a music festival, and a collaborative arts practice that Teresa was talking about. So we're going to move on to a theatre project now. 2 years ago, when we could still travel and sit in theatres, I had the pleasure of experiencing Uprooted at Cairde Festival. This was a work in progress theatre piece devised by members of the migrant community living in Sligo that were in or had come through the direct provision system, as I understood. The work was made in collaboration with Broken Talkers. As most of you will be aware, such collaborations are hugely complex. With factors like the vulnerability of the participant's status within the state having to be considered, alongside the usual entangled web of logistics. I'm delighted to be able to welcome Tara McGowan, the artistic director from Cairde, and Uprooted participant Charmaine Matonsi, to share with us how the relationships and creative practices that were central to this project were sustained and involved during COVID.
Thanks, David, and thanks to you and to Carl and to Adrian and the Arts Council for inviting myself and Charmaine here to talk about our project. So yeah, my name's Tara, I'm Director of Corja, and one of the central ethoses of the festival is to work in community and collaborative settings. We're very interested in opening access and pathways to the arts, which might not already exist or which may be difficult to navigate. So I'm here today with Charmaine Matonsi to talk about one of those collaborative arts projects we've been working on since, in some ways, since 2017, called Uprooted. To give you some brief background, in the winter of 2017, the festival, together with the Hawkswell Theatre and theatre artist Donal O'Kelly, we ran a series of taster workshops across different art forms, which we opened out to the residents of the Direct Provision Centre here in Sligo. Following feedback from this, and then again in partnership with the Hawkswell, we offered a series of acting classes for beginners to the people living in direct provision. We put the word out in a variety of ways, obviously to people who'd participated in the taster art form workshops, through Diversity Sligo, through Sligo Global Kitchen, which is a kind of a well-established community food project that we regularly engage with at the festival. And most importantly, we spoke with Loveth Oyeboka, who is the voluntary cultural coordinator in Globe House. She suggested the best way to reach people is to print out flyers that she would then distribute for us in Globe House. And over to you, Charmaine.
Yeah, thank you, Tara. Hi, everyone. My name is Charmaine Matonsi, and I'm originally from Zimbabwe. I have been involved with the Uprooted project since the beginning. For me, it started when
Charmaine, do you just want to turn on your camera? Is perfect, yeah.
Oh, sorry, just a minute. Yeah. Okay, it's fine. So just a minute. Just a minute.
Do you want to keep going there, Tara? And
yeah. Sorry. I think I'm breaking up my network. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
There we are. Yes, that's perfect. Yeah. Now, Charmaine. Well done.
Oh yeah, thank you. As I was saying, for me, it started when a leaflet was put underneath my door in Clubhouse. I looked at it with my two other roommates, and then we decided that it looked really, really interesting and we would love to give it a go. We were still new in Sligo and it was so important to have something to do. We wanted to try something new and take up the opportunity to do something different and get out of Clubhouse and meet people. I also wanted to challenge myself and take myself out of my comfort zone. I had no idea what the acting classes would be like. I didn't know the festival or the Hawkswell Theatre, but it sounded really, really interesting. The first class I went to was very full, maybe 25 people there. It was quite exciting. In the beginning, we did a lot of improvisation and role playing. We worked a lot on confidence building and being able to stand in front of a group of people. It was really fun and it awoke the love of theatre for me. Over to you, Tara.
Yeah, so we continued with the acting classes that summer and into the autumn and winter of 2018. And at this point, a group of 10 to 12 people were attending regularly. We discussed what the next steps for this group would be. There was already a real dedication and a commitment and a love of theatre there. So the obvious next step was to create a performance. I and some of the other members of the group were familiar with the work of Broken Talkers. They're a really well-known theatre company who have an excellent track record for working in community and socially engaged settings. So we thought it would be really exciting if we were able to collaborate with them. We approached Gary and Phelim, who were thankfully into the idea. We applied to the Arts Council for arts grant funding for this project and we were successful. So we started this collaboration or this next stage in January 2019.
Yeah. In the beginning, we were a bit nervous about working with them. I mean, Gary and Phelim, and we wondered, are we going to be good enough? When we started working with Gary and Phelim, we found out that they were quite relaxed and open. And even though we're still a bit nervous, we felt comfortable working with them pretty fast. We started our writing exercises where the group were asked to write about what are the things in the world that matter to us? What do we want to talk about in the play? We met every week for workshops. Gary and Phelim would go back to Dublin and then come back with some script ideas from our writing exercises. In this way, we came up with our script. One thing that struck me during this whole process is that we were all the same. Everyone in the group was dealing with their own personal stuff and trying to fit in. And this became our global theme. What do you have to do to fit in? Being on stage was a really nice experience. Surprisingly for me, I think I did good. Around the same time, I got some work as an extra on Sally Rooney's No More People. Being part of the play encouraged me and opened doors for me to do other projects. I became a co-creator on a theater project called The Bed, which was filmed around last year for the festival. I also went to do some work with Donald O'Kelly and with the Hawkswell Theatre as well.
So as David mentioned, we shared the piece as a work in progress at the festival in July 2019. We had 3 performances, we had full audiences, and we had a really great response. So the piece had huge potential to be further developed. So we once again applied to Arts Grant funding and were again successful, thankfully. We approached other partners, Errigal Arts Festival, who came on board as a touring partner. We spoke with Dublin Fringe Festival, who were interested in the development of the piece. And we're grateful to the Hawkswell Theatre for having been on board since the very beginning as one of the key partners on the project. Also, we're grateful to Creative Sligo, which funded the project in its research and development phase. So we went back to work on the script last winter. So this time over a series of Zoom workshops. We were exploring what aspects of the original piece worked well, what we felt maybe didn't work so well, and what are the new aspects that we wanted to add into the project. A lot had happened since our original premiere in July 2019.
Exactly. We spoke a lot about Black Lives Matter, and we had some really, really detailed conversation around the things such as color, prejudice, microaggressions, white saviors. We also explored some of the themes through writing. We know each other so well at this point that we're able to have a really honest conversation.
Very true. At the beginning of the year, it started to become apparent that touring theatre was probably not going to happen in 2021, especially a large piece of theatre like this with a cast of 10. But we were gaining momentum and we didn't want to lose that. At a production meeting, Gary, Phelim and I discussed the idea of moving from the format of theatre to short film and how feasible that might be. Before we even broached it with the group, we wanted to make sure that it was okay with our principal funders, the Arts Council, who said it's fine as long as the main aims of the project still remain the same. And you know, the main aims of the project have always been the same. It's about a community cast together with broken talkers co-creating a piece of art. So now, before speaking with our other partners, we went back to the group to see what they thought of the idea.
We all wondered how we're going to continue, how we're going to be able to get together and rehearse in a theater. So when Gary, Phelim and Tara proposed to create a short film, we were very, very excited by this idea. This was something new. It was going to be a new challenge. It's still a new challenge now. We do miss being on stage, but we know that we have to adapt as times have changed. In our weekly workshops, we started talking about how we take our ideas from the theater to a short film. We went back into writing exercises to find out together what do we want to say with our short film? How do we keep some of our original ideas? And how do we bring in some of the new ideas? What is going to be our message?
So then with the group on board and the funders, we went to the Hawkswell Theatre and Errigal Arts Festival, who were both going to present the work this July. And they were also very supportive of the move. So we continue to meet weekly on Zoom. And it's because of the incredible commitment of this group of people and broken talkers, the time that we've had to develop a relationship and the trust that we've been able to build up between the group, as well as the support of various partners, that the group are able to adapt and to keep working. We've had to adapt from theatre production to film production. Phelim had previously worked with Zlata Filipovic of Invisible Thread Films, and we're now working with Zlata and her co-director Anna as the co-film producers for our work. They completely understand the nature of the project, and a creative team are currently being finalized with this in mind. We've set our shoot days for June. We're rewriting the script. Naturally, to move from a theatre piece, which might be just about an hour long, to a 15-minute short film means some sacrifices have to be made, but the decisions are being made jointly, as it's still very much an ensemble piece. Our plan now is to premiere this at an Irish film festival, and at this year's Arts Festival, we'll be sharing a behind the scenes making of the film with a discussion around the collaborative arts practice. And now, just to finish very briefly, I just want to share a few quick pictures of the rest of the group. So just bear with me just 2 seconds. Is that working?
Yes, it is.
Yes. So, sorry. This is our...
Tara, if you just want to click on play from start. Do you
Thanks,
see?
Adrian. I knew I'd forget it. So this is most of the group. There were 2 people missing that day in our rehearsal room. This is the piece that looked at the Hawkswell Theatre in July 2019. And this final picture is the jubilee of the premiere night at the Hawkswell in July 2019, and you can see how happy and delighted everybody looks. This same group are working together now to create a short film. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Tara and Charmaine. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the result of that. And it's interesting that the same words are coming up in all of the presentations. I mean, what I'm struck with certainly is the importance of time. The importance of time in these relationships, whether they're community relationships like the one you have with your emerging group of theatre makers in Sligo, or in the relationships that Theresia is building up in Tipperary with the artists, and Wolodymyr with the examples of the different festivals, that these are things that don't happen overnight, and they're examples of structures that will support the future of the festival making. The other word that you brought up, which was very interesting, was trust, and that's certainly hugely important in all of these aspects, but particularly in the complex relationships that you're engaged in developing there. And that great word, adapt, that what we've become experts at, or certainly challenged to do in the last year is adapt. So it's great to hear an update on that project. So as I said, we had a very busy schedule today, and thank you to all the speakers for being so rigorous in your timekeeping. I felt it was so difficult to select examples of this, because so many festivals are doing so many extraordinary work, and all festivals are involved in this aspect of networking and building relationships and sustaining them, and all have had to adapt during COVID. So as I've outlined in my introductions to all of these Pathways sessions, the community of festival makers is very diverse, with organizations having different art form focus and different scales of operation. What I've tried to do has been to focus on the aspects of festival making that are shared by this community. I've also tried to ensure that the voices of the speakers, as today, have reflected the diversity of this community. So today we've had 2 very young festivals, Applefest and Limerick Early Music Festival, representing the smaller festivals, the example from Cairde Festival representing what would be considered a mid-scale festival, and then Cork Midsummer Festival, which is one of the larger festivals in the country. We're going to move now to an international context, to Edinburgh International Festival, that many consider to be, along with the Avignon Festival, the inspiration for the Contemporary Arts Festival. The first Edinburgh International Festival was in 1947. Though I was reading today on the festival website that the idea for the festival came from 1942. So it was actually during the war when the idea started to percolate. But it was motivated after the war by the idea to reconcile people after the war. There was a great need to reconcile people after the war, and to let great art refresh souls and transcend all political and cultural boundaries. And I've lifted that off the festival website. But it is that idea that after the war we needed to come together, and what greater way to bring people together than art. And it's something that we're all doing in our different ways all over the country. So it's a real delight to be able to introduce the festival's director, a current director, who is Fergus Linehan, who cut his teeth working alongside the wonderful Tony O'Dowley in the Dublin Theatre Festival during the 1990s. He succeeded Tony as artistic director in 1999, and having programmed 4 festivals in Dublin, moved on to a distinguished international career, including a term as director of the prestigious Sydney Arts Festival, before landing in Edinburgh in 2015. So you're very, very welcome, Fergus, to provide us with, I suppose, a fitting finale to this Pathway series. Are you with us in the room, Fergus?
Here I am, David. I am here.
There you are.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. And thank you very much to all my colleagues. Made me feel very homesick. And as you say, a really interesting and diverse range, and always an interesting question as to a festival grouping and all of the different elements that implies. As you say, our festival started in 1947. It was founded by a refugee who fled Nazi Germany. So it was absolutely international at its roots, and was the result of the kind of need for reconciliation. I just wanted to talk today a little bit specifically about COVID and what it has meant for us, and in particular in relation to stakeholders, and just asking the question that was asked, which is what has been damaged and what initiatives have come out of it. I'm just going to share my screen for just one moment. Just for those of you, that'll be the wrong presentation, that'll be the right presentation. So the Edinburgh International Festival is one of 5 festivals that takes place each August, including the Fringe, the Tattoo, the Art Festival, and the Book Festival, and we're all quite different. Our festival is by invitation only, and we try to work in all of the larger venues in the city. So we would have a major orchestral and recital program across a number of venues. This is the Usher Hall here. This is the Playhouse Theatre, but essentially the city's main cultural infrastructure, and presenting dance theatre, music, and whatever else we can think of from Scotland, from the UK, and from around the world. We'll also do a range of special events. This was in 2019, our opening event, which was with the Los Angeles Philharmonic in Tynecastle Football Stadium. So we'll always have a range of major events as well as things like a famous fireworks concert, which we do at the end of the festival each year. We'll also always be looking at buildings which have been underused or deserted. So this is a beautiful theatre called the Leith Theatre, which has been boarded up for many years. So again, going into venues that haven't been used. But obviously, these are projects of real scale. We do things of a smaller scale as well. And of course, the artist is always at the core of what we do. We've had many Irish companies, of course, with Druid, with the Gate Theatre, artists like Martin Hayes and Enda Walsh and Landmark, and we would generally have quite a strong Irish contingent. So we were in the middle of, we're literally about to launch the program last March. 18th of March was our big launch. We do a launch in London and in Paris and in Berlin as well. And then, of course, this happened. So our entire program was there, it was ready to go. And then for the first time in 72 or 73 years, all of us cancelled at the same time. And this was, I mean, it was just a phenomenal moment for the city, because I think, and this is where the stakeholder question really comes in, because it starts to throw back a question as to who are you responsible to, who owns a festival, who invests in it, and why do they invest in it. And in terms of stakeholders, and particularly events of the sort of scale we're working on, many people own it for very different reasons. Some people see it as a great boon to the economy and they're investing in it from a tourism point of view. Some people invest in it as part of an amateur choir, and it's very much to do with their social lives. And some people invest in it purely for artistic reasons, and that might come from the creative Scotland end, which is our Arts Council. So you have this multiplicity of stakeholders with many, many different views. We immediately started to think about a few things. We started to think about employment and our role as an employer of everyone from technicians through to artists. We started to think of it in terms of the view that the world had of Edinburgh and Scotland, and sending something really positive out. We saw it as a moment for us to think about how we could advance live performance. And you've got to remember, Scotland has been particularly strict, much more so than England. We haven't had a performance here since the 22nd of March of any sort. Just before the festival, nobody had even been allowed in to film in a theatre. So all of our ensembles hadn't even been together, musicians hadn't played together, or dancers hadn't danced together. And then just to cheer people up, just because we were really, really in a very, very bad way. So we started to think about, about the image of the ghost light, which was the last remaining light that was on stage in all of the theatres. And how this was a sort of, you know, like a flame that kept on burning, that was going to grow further and further out into the recovery and the rebound and everything else. So this became a symbol for us for how we would approach the year. And we also thought a lot about a Primal Scream, the Scottish band song called My Light Shines On. And so we developed a program called My Light Shines On, which involved going to each of the places in the city where there would have been people gathering, because we weren't allowed to do anything where it might make people gather, and begin to send these lights up into the night sky, which kind of danced around the night sky. And so all of these kind of famous locations where there would have been performances going on, this is the castle where the tattoo was going on, we kind of lit up the sky. And this was about, these images were carried all over the world, both in terms of media, news media, and just generally. And this is where the book festival would have been. And so this was just to set out sort of a sense of joy in a way that people wouldn't gather. We also lit up all our theatres from the inside. We got the lighting stock and we lit them out, because we just didn't want it to go sort of the city to feel kind of funereal throughout the period. And then we commissioned a range of works from some companies. This was with Scottish Ballet. The earlier image was the National Theatre of Scotland. And we brought artists back into the venues, which was very difficult, having to work with government. We got permission 24 hours before we did it, and created a whole series of films and performances, which was available throughout and got terrific uptake. But really, this was about moving things forward in terms of general permission. As the year went on, we started investing in other projects. This was a piece called A Lament for Sheku Bayou, which became another film project, but this was outside of the festival period. So we started looking at ways that we could continue to invest in the sort of festival ecosystem with small bits of support, giving money to street press to be able to commission articles from journalists who were obviously in a bad way, supporting podcasts and looking at ways in which we could do that. We started to build these stages into school playgrounds. We've got a terrific workshop, and we haven't even been able to use them yet. But the idea that when we come out the other side of that, that we would have these stages across school grounds throughout the city. And so we come to this year. And again, our main driver here is to continue to advance the journey back to live performance. And so what we're doing at the moment in 2021 is building these outdoor pavilions, essentially, which are covered, and creating a range of concert stages across the city. which will allow us to present a festival within the realms of outdoors. This is really about trying to program a festival which won't get cancelled, which is the least likely, because I think one of the hardest things for people has been to constantly be engaged and for audiences to be engaged and then for it to be cancelled. So this is our kind of cautious route back to live performance. And so we've just announced that this is what we'll be doing, and we'll be announcing the program for that on the 2nd of June. So I'm just trying to see how I can stop. So then just to quickly talk through some of the stakeholder issues. I mean, the first was with audiences and how we could maintain our connection with them. And obviously digital technology has been a very strong part of that, but also more old school things like for older people creating CDs and things. The funding bodies has been obviously complicated, but in terms of our local and our national Creative Scotland and our city council, they've been incredibly supportive. But obviously maintaining our wider international funding body connections has also been somewhat challenging. We had an incredible response from donors and sponsors. Sponsors, more difficult because it wasn't in their gift to be able to just support something for purely philanthropic reasons. But we have a donor base, and I was getting people writing me little cards with checks for £20 saying, please don't let the festival die. And just really an outpouring of love when you realize just kind of how many people care very deeply about this. I think one of the big questions which has come out of this is the people who work on festivals as stakeholders, and perhaps we haven't thought about them as deeply in those terms as we have now. And obviously we've had the real difficulty of just people's terms of engagement, where if you're a full-time employee, you had all sorts of rights and access to furlough and protections. And if you were a freelance worker, you had none of that. And in fact, we're probably insidiously caught between being a freelancer and being a PAYE employee. So we could talk all day about that, but I think one of the big things to come out of this are the people who work on festivals as stakeholders in it. We had a lot to do with those immediately affected with the cancellation in terms of either finding some recompense financially or working out how we would invite them back at another point. The festival ecosystem in our city is absolutely critical, and already we've lost people who are probably have left the industry and may not come back. So this has been a big part of our work with government. The wider performing arts industry in Edinburgh and Scotland, again, perhaps even companies we don't normally work with. But the fact is that we are such a key part of that ecosystem, finding ways in which we present them. And then, of course, trying to reach out internationally and try to maintain our relationships with our international partners. And obviously, like everyone else, trying to second guess what's going to happen. This has been interesting with the wider events industry. We found ourselves very much kind of put together with sports, with conferencing, even with religious services. Anything that required groups of people to come together in numbers suddenly came together into an events industry board grouping. And I think that's going to be a real legacy of this. And then the real loss at the moment has been schools and participatory organizations. We have a chorus of about 180 singers. We have relationships with schools that have been built up over many, many years, and some of the individual students in that. And the rebuilding of them as sort of meaningful stakeholder contributors is the hardest part, I have to say. So the things that I think have been damaged, I worry about cultural policy having been thrown to one side, and we'll have to rebuild that. I mentioned about losing personnel to other industries. And this, I think perhaps as well, this schism that's opening up between different workers, depending on which way their work is constituted. But I know there's a lot of interesting things to come back from that. The new initiatives, I think there's more platforms for us to speak to each other as stakeholders than I've ever seen before. I probably feel more connected to certain people than I ever would before. And I think people have access to me and I have access to them, perhaps in a way that wouldn't have been possible before. I mentioned the events industry and the arts understanding itself, understanding perhaps its own value, within a wider events industry context. And so if we're there with the European Football Championships and the big conference centre and us, people realise that we can certainly exist within the arts industry, but we're also very valid within those discussions too. And then I said as well, just a real look at the working conditions and thinking about stakeholders in those contexts. So those are just the areas. This is sort of where we're down in the trenches, I guess, these particular areas, and there's so much work to be done. The one, as I say, I'm probably most concerned about is our inability at the moment to develop our connections with schools and local choirs and local dance companies and all of those people over many years. The rebuild into that in a meaningful way feels like it's going to be a huge piece of work. The flip side, of course, is everyone will just be dying to do it. So even though we're coming back in quite a hesitant way in 21, I feel that there's going to be this cathartic need for festivals coming into 22, the like of which we probably won't have seen since 1947. So that's probably enough for me for now. Thank you all.
Fergus, Linehan.
Thank you very much, Fergus. And I think your final slide there was terrific in encapsulating the complexity of the role that we've all, although I'm a former festival maker now, but it's a role that I very much understand. All those, the juggling of all those balls, or I used to think of it as a web, that each individual, that together created something very strong and very beautiful, but it actually was very fragile in its the little connections that we made in different places. I would worry if your alliances with sport were with the European Super League. I think that might might not prove a very helpful alliance. But it is interesting that development has happened. And thank you again for that reminder about the vulnerability of the arts workers. I think it is something that we all need to be very conscious of, because it is the arts workers who make it possible for us and it's not just the artists, because a lot of focus has been on artists and projects have gone on, but it's the people who put up the scaffolding and the rigging and the less glamorous side of it that are so important to our practice. And it's interesting you mentioned cultural policy, the damage to cultural policy as a danger, because certainly the Carl and I, in devising this program, were very conscious of the need to keep abreast of how festivals were evolving, how they were managing in COVID, how they were viewing the future, their future post-COVID. And we've heard a lot about blended festivals and the importance of using these new technologies in a positive way. So we certainly thank you all the speakers we had today, and all of the speakers in the previous ones, and also the contribution in the breakout groups, because that intelligence is now part of the archive in the Arts Council. It's available to all of you online, because we're putting an archive online, so there's public access to it. But it also is informing internally, so that the policy and the future funding, and as we've seen today, a number of projects benefited from the capacity building funding, and the capacity building funding came in part from the intelligence we got at these webinars last year. So we're heading on for 4 o'clock. Once again, a big thank you and an applause. I know it's very silent, but a great applause to the speakers today, both for the richness of their contributions, the diversity, and also for keeping to time, because that was quite a challenge to have 6 different speakers presenting so many different aspects. We're going to take a short break at 4 o'clock, 5 minutes, and break into breakout groups. And we have Maria Fleming and Liz Kelly and Cleona Marr are going to be hosting 3 breakout groups. So thank you to them for taking that out. And we will have Adrian, myself, and another note taker will be on hand. So again, gathering your thoughts and your ideas on today's presentations or something else. So I think Carl has been called into session in the Arts Council with the Arts Council, so he's not here. So I would like to thank you all, as I have, but I'd also like to thank my colleague Adrian Caldwell, whom you'll all know from the emails, and he's here and has been absolutely fantastic in delivering on the logistics of this and made it look effortless. We've run a technologically impeccable with. So thank you to Adrian from me, and I'm sure on behalf of all of you. So there you are. It's a quiet finish. We can't go for a glass of wine today, but certainly there's a commitment in the Arts Council to bring this community back together. Hopefully next year, possibly towards the end of next year, in some form to follow up on the work we did at Changemakers. And so that we can meet each other in person and continue these conversations. So we'll just take a break. Is that right, Adrian?
Yeah, so a 5-minute break. So just before 4:05, we'll come back and I'll split everybody up into breakout rooms. So go and grab yourself some tea or whatever. So.
Okay, thanks a lot. See you in 5 minutes.
Thank you.